Hey, aloha.
Welcome back,
Aloha.
stranger.
Hey, thanks. Good to be back.
Nice. Hey, Russ.
Hi, Peter. Hey, everyone.
Hi, Keone.
Oh, there you go. Now I can unmute myself. Aloha, gentlemen. Happy Aloha Friday to all of you.
Aloha
Happy Aloha
Friday to you,
Friday.
too.
Same.
We made it. We made it.
Almost.
Aloha, AJ.
How's it? Aloha.
Keone Ford, 98, Kamehameha grad.
My brother was
Big honor,
99.
man.
My brother was 99. Trapper Perkins. Played volleyball.
Micah Perkins, your cousin.
That is my nephew.
Oh,
Yeah.
Micah, your nephew.
Yeah. So my brother is, so I'm 93. My second brother played football, basketball, and track at 95. And then my baby brother was Trapper Perkins, Trapper John. He was volleyball, basketball, track. He was the #1 volleyball player in Hawaii.
That's
And
fantastic.
so Micah Perkins, my classmate, 98. But you said that's your nephew.
Yeah, I think his dad is my second cousin.
Got it. Awesome. Well, Imua, I was glad to see that.
Maikai.
Hey, it's really nice to hear you 99-year-old guys still play sports.
I watch sports more than I play.
Right. I say I play audience.
Yeah.
Hey, Mika.
Hey, Uncle Jerry.
How's it? Sydney.
Hey Jerry, how's it? Alika here. Sorry, I'm driving.
Jerry.
I had to go back into town, but I will be
Hi.
listening in.
Okay.
Hello, everyone.
Aloha.
Afternoon, AJ. Hopefully we have some others joining us as well.
Well, it's just for, I would expect others to be logging in over the next few minutes. And when maybe at about 4 or 5 after, Jerry, you could introduce AJ, and AJ will just kind of hand it off. And the show is yours.
Wow.
So just to let you guys know, I was talking with Kevin Dayton from Civil Beat. And I thought, this is something that needs to be heard from in the news. And I thought Civil Beat might be the best media to send it out on. And he's very interested. He won't be able to be on, but he's at a legislative finance hearing. So he said that if we record this, like a copy of it, and maybe someday we'll have him introduce you and introduce AJ in a private interview. If you don't mind, AJ.
Whatever I can do to help.
So Mitch Ewan is on the line, and maybe before people come on, maybe Mitch, you can kind of give them your background and what you do in Hawaii with the hydrogen.
Sure. Hey, AJ, it's nice to meet you. I've heard a lot of good things about you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm at the Hawaii Natural Energy Institute. I'm the Hydrogen Systems Program Manager. I've been there, I think, 22 years. And so what my big project is to introduce hydrogen buses for the Big Island Mass Transit Agency. And we have a working hydrogen station at Nelha. And our first bus is in passenger service. And we have 2 additional buses on the way. I've been in the hydrogen game for about 30 years. And big claim to fame is I built the world's first PEM fuel cell powered car 30 years ago.
Nice.
So that's about it. Without me, going off on a long diatribe.
Appreciate it. Nice to meet you, Mitch.
But if you want to see the hydrogen station, I have a full-time technician there. His name is Aaron McCall, and you're welcome to have a tour of it. It's right at the end of the road down by the administration buildings for Nelha. So
That's awesome.
So that's about it.
I appreciate it. I'd love to come and take a look.
It's a long ride though. 'Cause he's in California. He's coming over
Oh,
for
I
the
thought you were
Orange
here.
conference on the 18th. Conference starts on the 22nd to the 24th. So maybe let me just start by introducing AJ. I think everybody kind of saw his resume already, but most importantly, he's a local boy and he wants to bring back to Hawaii the experience that he has that is very valuable for us here in Hawaii. So we'll just leave it at that. And AJ, go ahead.
Mahalo for the invitation, Jerry and Peter. Thank you guys so much for setting this up. And Sydney, mahalo again. So AJ Perkins, born and raised, Kaneohe, Kamehameha grad, and my background is business. I've been in the renewable energy and sustainability industry for only about 7 or 8 years. I sat as a senior advisor for the California Energy Alliance, helping to rewrite demand response policy for the state of California. I also sit on CAKE, which is the California Energy Efficiency Coordinating Coalition. And this group is helping to look at incentives and design incentive programs to help disseminate the public purpose funds here in California. We've got a little over $12 billion in our public purpose fund. So it's to help with increasing the impact of energy efficiency upgrades throughout the state. And because of this, I sit in a unique position where on one side I'm helping to shape policy. On the other side, I am helping to shape and disseminate incentive programs. And right in the middle, I ran one of the fastest growing microgrid integration and aggregation companies in the country. We have over 3.8 gigawatts of projects under contract. And one of our biggest contracts is in the third largest city in California, based on geographical size. California City, small population, a little over 15,000 people, but they are looking to grow their city. And the utility specifically said to the new businesses, the soonest we can get you power is 2035. They told the city, the soonest we can get you the power you're looking for is 2050. So about 6 years ago, the city put out an RFP to help create their own power infrastructure. A company called Baker Energy won that contract. 5 years, they weren't able to really do much because it's a challenge. And they asked us if we could help them. And within 3 months, we started turning on lights. Since then, we've created a temporary power program for the businesses, and we are engaged. We've been engaged with them looking to do an infrastructure as a service policy and scenario with them, in which we are bringing energy, telecom, and water to the city in a nice package for them, let's call it. Part of one of the things that we are doing is, you don't eat an elephant in one sitting. You take bites of it, right? And especially because of the fact that, a project like this at 3 gigawatts, you're talking $10 to $12 billion at minimum, right? So nobody's going to lend a single company or a city that doesn't have the credit rating to be able to take on that type of debt. So what we did was we created different nodes, smaller nodes that were 20 to 50 megawatts each, and use that as a way to continue to build up the power infrastructure as we do. So we just got approval for $750 million last month, so that we will be able to start building our first node in California City. And through this first node, we are going to be incorporating the production and usage of hydrogen utilizing bioethanol. So this was important to us, as a microgrid guy. Just as a little background, I was introduced to microgrids because of Jigar Shah. So Jigar Shah, the famous Jigar Shah that created the first PPA, he came from Sun Edison. He and I would have calls, and back in, I think it was 2017, when right after the Paradise fires, PG&E was looking to file bankruptcy, And he and I were on the phone, and he said, AJ, I need you to start doing microgrids. My company, Generate Capital at the time, we will fund all of it, but everybody knows PG&E is going to file bankruptcy, but what they don't know is they're going to shut off the power 30 times next year. It's what we all know today as public safety power shutoffs, right? So it was through this conversation that we started talking about microgrids, and that's where I started my process of understanding microgrids in a way that is pretty unique. Hence some of the companies that I've started prior to Instant On. I had another company that we successfully exited called DR Microgrid, which stands for Demand Response Microgrids, which is utilizing microgrids to respond to demand response. Because of our ability to utilize it in demand response situations, we build our microgrids differently. Most people build it based on what they have in front of them. We're building it in an oversized capacity because we are actually deliberately utilizing the excess energy to support the grid. So,
Excuse me, AJ,
please.
Just a thought for it, just in case anybody's not clear on what a microgrid is. Could we define that in terms of its energy source and the distribution scope relative to what we're most used to, which is centralized grid distribution of electrical power. Thank you.
Peter, no, I appreciate it, Peter. That's actually great understanding. So a microgrid is a combination of three things. Number one, generation. So the generation could be solar, wind, diesel generators for all we care. It's generating power, right? Ideally, we're looking for sustainable power, right? The second component is something to store that power. So in most cases, what we know of as, battery storage. The third component is controls. Something that allows us to be able to control load, control where things go, but more importantly, those controls allow you to remove yourself safely from the grid so that you can island your building, your campus, your home. Okay, now this is really important because there's a lot of people that know my house has solar, so I'm good. If the power shuts off, your power is shut off. Some people say, well, I've got solar and batteries, so I'm good. If the power shuts off, your power still shuts off. Why? Because they don't want the power that you're producing on your solar panels that goes into the battery, that goes into your house. They do not want any of that power flowing back into the grid. Because say there was something that happened on the grid, and a pole went down, you've got a lineman out there that's working on it. If you're producing power and it goes back into the grid, they get hurt. So they intentionally make sure nothing can come back onto the grid. Hence, you need that third or fourth component, which is, an automatic transfer switch or something to that point where it allows you to disconnect from the grid. Hence, they call it islanding from the grid. These are the components of a microgrid. So a lot of what we see on the larger scale, commercial and industrial and utility scale, we've got larger scale solar farms. We've got wind farms. On a lot of the military bases, they actually have diesel generators operating, right? So our goal, not only within the company, but also, let's say from the Hawaii standpoint, is as we're creating these grids, these microgrids, we want it to be sustainable. We want it to be clean, because the idea is I don't want to be independent from the grid, but then create a bigger challenge for the community, for my family, and all those around. So this is also very important. As a microgrid guy, my number one thing is resiliency. That's my personal number one thing, is resiliency, allowing families and communities and businesses to be able to keep people safe by ensuring that they have this constant flow of power. Ideally, that power is coming from a sustainable renewable energy source like solar, batteries. Now, I will say this, and people, you can hate me for saying this, okay? At some points, we have had to integrate diesel generators in our microgrids. Now, some people say, AJ, but you're a sustainability guy, you're bad, but that's so wrong. Really? So I can tell you a real story. This is true story that happened. My dad was in our home here in California, and he has to wear a breathing machine. You know, he's got Agent Orange and he's sick and all this stuff. The power shut off. My dad's breathing machine stopped working. I wasn't home. I didn't know what to do. I had a microgrid, but I didn't have the ability to turn it on in time and do all of these different things and whatever needed to be done. Well, we had a problem because our battery and control system went down. Luckily, somebody was able to turn on the generator. I love my dad. Do I not turn on the diesel generator in the name of sustainability? I immediately, when I was in a position to shut off that diesel generator and put it onto renewable source, I did it. So I look at, and again, this is me. My number one thing is resiliency, is to protect the people, family, and communities that I'm serving. But a very immediate second is making sure that the power that I deliver is the cleanest and best power available for that microgrid. So I set the stage because sometimes we look at it saying, I want the best. I want wind. I want solar. I want this. There's good, better, best. And we need to look at it as the best is solar on my entire house. The other problem is, you know, we may not have all of it, right? So some of the challenges that we ran into in building microgrids, and this is something that's really also was poignant. When we were going through these wildfires in California, we put in many nanogrids, I should say, residential microgrids. Okay, we had hundreds, if not thousands, of these nanogrids all spread out throughout Northern California. We would get calls when these wildfires were going saying, my nanogrid's not working. Really? How is that? Sure enough, we'd look and their solar was barely producing enough power to power an LED light bulb. It's the middle of the day. Why is that? Because the sun was being blocked out by all of the smoke. I needed a secondary source of power. That's where I started to really look into figuring out how hydrogen fuel cells and fuel cells in general could be able to provide these types of secondary backups to the solar that I have. It was fully working. Everything was working. The problem is, who would have ever guessed that the sun would get blocked out by smoke, right? And then the soot would sit on top of these solar panels, right? So I say that because as we continue to build these plans, there's a lot of learning that we can take from all of these different scenarios, right? I've lived in Hawaii my entire life. I didn't leave there until 2010, and I've never seen the destruction that I've just recently seen in Lahaina. Never. My family, the Perkins, is all firemen. Like literally, the chief of fire department, Honolulu Fire Department, is a Perkins. And I don't think we've ever seen this type of destruction. So now, does that change how we build microgrids? Absolutely. Absolutely. I think it's necessary, right? Because when we're creating these microgrids, whether it's on the utility scale, CNI, commercial and industrial, or residential, I personally continue to look at it, say, how do we create redundancy? How do we create the ability for it to utilize solar, but if solar is not available for whatever reason, there's a secondary source of power, right? So I hope that helps understand, create some understanding around the concept and conversation of microgrids, because what this does is it pushes us towards the next conversation of how I was reintroduced to Hawaii. I have done a lot of projects, like I said, throughout California, and my old company, Instant On, the microgrid integration and aggregation company, we actually have the contract to take Tonga to 100% renewable. We have actually a 40 megawatt solar, 40 megawatt hour battery project there that we're doing, and helping a few different island nations throughout the Pacific. Okay. Now, I've also recently joined a company called TechFlow. TechFlow is a 25-year-old 100% employee-owned company that's rooted in IT. This was very important to me because for anybody that plays in the larger infrastructure play, I can say that when you start talking to these larger entities about microgrids, the very next conversation that I was getting right after we talked about power was cybersecurity. How secure is my data? How secure is my customers? How secure is this system, right? So TechFlow is rooted in IT, but they have 4 different divisions. 3 divisions are very applicable to what we do. They primarily serve on the military and federal government side. Just 2 or 3 weeks ago, we made the announcement that, we've been in TSA for a long time. So just recently, about 2 or 3 weeks ago, we made the announcement that we have a 7-year, $2.1 billion contract with the TSA to support the platform services for their explosive detection devices. This puts our employees in every single, over 300 airports around the nation. We've been there. We've been doing this work with TSA for a long time. But why is this important is because not only are we doing the actual operations and maintenance of the explosive detection systems, but we're in every state around the country. So that's one scenario. The other thing is we also have the contract to do EV infrastructure at all the military bases in the country. Therein lies another opportunity because we are probably installing more EV infrastructure than almost any other company in the country. The learning that we are going through is immense. Now, there were 44 companies going after this RFP, and one of the things that we were able to show is we could actually power GOV and POV, government-owned vehicles, private or personal-owned vehicles, utilizing the same equipment. This is really important, right? Can you imagine if you're a state or federal agencies and you have to figure out who can charge at this particular charger? This one is only for public facing, this one is for employees. So being able to utilize that same piece of equipment to charge both government employees and personal vehicles was a really exciting opportunity for the military to take advantage of. That type of learning is something that we could bring to the private sector. We've got campuses, school campuses, we've got state and city and county offices that have the ability, they have their own fleets of vehicles. Can you imagine being able to support the installation of EV infrastructure and being able to give your employees the ability to charge the government vehicles as well as personal vehicles utilizing that same equipment? So these things continue to really come into fruition. And about 3 months ago, my TechFlow said, AJ, we were asked if we could help design a natural gas-based airport. And my bosses said, not necessarily natural gas, but if it was hydrogen, we'd have interest. They said, really? We didn't think that would be possible yet. We thought it was further down the line because hydrogen is this chicken and egg conversation, right? And I'm sure Mitch can kind of attest to this, right? Like, how can I justify production when I don't have people that can use it? Well, how can I use it until it truly is that back and forth conversation. So when we talked about the idea of being able to create a hydrogen airport, they said, AJ, how would we do it? And I said, we need to go ahead and bring in hydrogen planes. Just so happened, January of last year, Zero Avia took their first flight on their hydrogen airplane. Shortly thereafter, Alaska Airlines placed an order for a bunch of hydrogen airplanes. Interestingly enough, we also know that Alaska Airlines and Hawaiian Airlines are now buddies, right? When I talked to Hawaiian Airlines at a conference and I asked them what their sustainability plans were as it relates to flight, they weren't there yet. They weren't talking about electric planes. They weren't talking about hydrogen planes. And I don't blame them. But now imagine with this union between Alaska Airlines and Hawaiian Airlines, that conversation changes a little bit. Now, bringing in hydrogen transportation using Zero Avia, other hydrogen transportation that we all know, the Nikolas of the world and all these other, transportation opportunities. Then we also bring in hydrogen prime power, bring in hydrogen backup power, and bring in hydrogen power to be able to help create EV infrastructure. If we bring all of these use cases to an airport, we could justify production. So some of the technologies that we were actively engaged with, we have a company called Golu that is able to produce green hydrogen using bioethanol. The interesting part is they're able to provide it to us at $8 per kilogram free incentives. So we were really excited. So we said, let's do a pilot in California. So we are actively engaged in putting together this pilot in California City to start producing hydrogen utilizing ethanol. I'm not the agriculture guy, but I do know that ethanol can be derived from corn or sugarcane. And I just kept thinking, can you imagine that? We literally bring back the sugarcane industry, and the byproduct of us being green is we get our premium Hawaiian sugar back again. So that was something that was just exciting. But then as we continue to have these conversations, I was able to, I work with Myron Thompson, who's a 25+ year veteran in the solar industry. And through him, I met Lorraine Akiba. And it was in this conversation that I was telling her that we were working on a hydrogen airport concept for SeaTac, LAX, or Oregon. And that's what she specifically said, AJ, I remember years ago that we had a presentation and we realized that the only way that we could turn our airports green is by using hydrogen. We don't have the space to electrify our airports. So it would have to be through hydrogen. And that got me excited. They set up a meeting with the Hawaii State Energy Office, with Mark Lick and the team. And they said, AJ, Honolulu International Airport might be a little more tough, but we think that you should go to Hilo. Hilo actually would be a good scenario because of the work that Mitch and his team is doing and all of these other groups that are really focused on bringing hydrogen to life. So that's where I was fortunate enough to continue to take these conversations forward. So what we have done as we continue to move down this path was we have a consortium of 19 manufacturers and technology partners. Fuel cell companies. I have a alkaline fuel cell manufacturer, a PEM fuel cell manufacturer, a solid oxide fuel cell manufacturer. All three of these different manufacturers have said, AJ, we'll come to Hawaii with you. We'll go ahead and help you bring our technologies there, and we'll either launch it or continue to support it. We've got Zero Avia, we've got eVTOLs that are running off of hydrogen and or SAF that are saying, AJ, we'll come there with you. We've got prime power fuel cells that are ready to come. We've got backup power. We've got power to electric vehicle charging utilizing hydrogen. So what we've done is curated a group that are able to be off-takers, I'll call them, to utilize hydrogen. That can give us justification to look towards production. So it was through these conversations that, we started to continue to build out how this could potentially look and come together. And the conversation started to get more real, right? Just last week, Jerry was able to tee up a conversation with Mitch Roth, the mayor, Mitch Roth, and it was a really good conversation. And I think everybody on the Big Island is really bullish in creating a better environment. How does that look? Everybody has different takes on it. But one of the things that I did before I brought any of these technology partners to Hawaii, this is one of the things that I told every single one of them. And this is what I'll continue to tell everybody before they come to Hawaii. I'm native Hawaiian. My family goes back to the kings and queens. I cannot see any manufacturer or technology partner coming to Hawaii without doing at least these three commitments. First commitment is you got to commit technology to Hawaii. So Honda, if you want to bring your PEM fuel cell to Hawaii, you need to commit 1,000 pieces or whatever that is. You commit an amount specifically for Hawaii and don't rescind on it, because California will sit there and say, hey, I need 500 of those pieces. You cannot come back to Hawaii and say, oh, I'm sorry, but the 1,000 pieces that I thought I had for you is not there. How can we as a state continue to move this back? This will be a train. It'll be slow to pick up, but once it goes, we cannot turn back around. We cannot stop it. So we need to make sure that we have the commitment. But on the flip side, we need to be able to have the state reciprocate that. Meaning, we cannot expect these technology companies to come in there and recoup their investment in 5 to 7 years. It's impossible. There's no way. We need to be able to give them the longevity, 20, 25, 30 years, to be able to not only amortize their investment, but also to be able to come back with learning. There's a lot of learning. We all can agree. You learn more doing a project on an island than you do most other places. Why? Because there's less influence of outside forces that'll change and skew your data, number one. Number two, there's less alternatives. If we were to talk about hydrogen in Arizona and be like, why would you do that? Got solar, got so much sun in Hawaii. Why would we talk about hydrogen? Because if we don't, we're going to continue to rely on Russian oil. Our options are less. So we have to be innovative in the way that we think because we don't have those options. So that's number one, is being able to commit technology. Number two, we need to be able to commit to bringing curriculum to our high school and colleges. We need to be able to make sure that these students are literally touching, feeling, playing with it, learning about it, and actually building this stuff. Being able to actually integrate and understand how these things work. I went to Kamehameha. I mean, it was a great school, but the reality is, I'm not afraid to say it. It's an expensive public school. That's what I grew up with, because I had a lot of friends that just didn't take advantage of the learning and benefits that a school like Kamehameha gives you. Now, things have changed tremendously over time, but I never would have thought about becoming a rocket scientist. Nowadays, that's what these kids are thinking. These kids are thinking along those lines. Can you imagine if they actually had a fuel cell in front of them that they could touch, feel, see it working? These are the conversations that we can actually instill in our students. Now, the reciprocation part is the schools actually have to encourage and adopt these curriculums. I can tell you right now, all of these manufacturers are excited. I have a battery manufacturer. Literally, they've got $850 million for the US government to build a US manufacturing plant in Buckeye, Arizona. It's called Core, K-O-R-E. They are saying, AJ, I will send you batteries. They have a portable battery, 250 kW, 500 kW, and 1 megawatt battery on wheels, literally. Put it in Puna one day and drive it across to the other side the next day. Their batteries, they're like, AJ, I'll send it over. Oh, and by the way, we would love to do internships with the schools. Can you imagine our kids being able to actually be in these manufacturing facilities, working on batteries and understanding it, right? So that's number two. Number three is you need to hire locally. Do not just hire somebody in California and move them to Hawaii. I can say this with great assurance. The challenges that these mainland companies have of finding local talent is real. It's hard for them. I'm a part of it. I mean, I can tell you, RE Plus is coming next week in 2 weeks on January 22nd. My company specifically said, AJ, I need you to go to Hawaii and I need you to find me local workers to be able to work on this TSA contract. Our biggest challenge in Hawaii is we don't have people on the ground in Hawaii. This is $40 to $80 an hour jobs. And guess what? I don't need an engineer. This is trade school level training. So these are the three commitments, right? Being able to make sure that inventory is allocated for Hawaii, make sure that we can bring curriculum to our high schools and colleges, and then number three, being able to hire locally. Now, some people, as I have these conversations with people in Hawaii, they're like, AJ, this is so awesome that you're looking to keep our kids in Hawaii. And I've said this before, and I feel sad saying it, but I got to make sure that everybody understands this, right? I'm not necessarily trying to keep our kids in Hawaii. Not yet. Because as a parent, I've got 5 children. Yeah. I'm not excited to say, I hope my children go to University of Hawaii. I really hope my children go to Stanford or Harvard or MIT. And then get the education and come back to Hawaii. No. Actually, I hope they get the education and go work for a really big company or learn and take off and do something really big. And then come back to Hawaii. Why is that important? Because right now, Hawaii doesn't have the stability to keep our kids earning really good wages yet. Let daddy take care of that. Let all of us on this call take care of that. Let's elevate the level and pay within our states by bringing these technologies, allowing us to truly turn Hawaii into a technology innovation hub of not just the Pacific, but the world. Like, this is truly where it should be. So that's where, I level set by saying, I want to teach our kids, but I want them to go away, learn, experience, and then come back. There's so much knowledge and understanding here that we can share with the world and vice versa, right? So so that's kind of where this has brought me full circle to be able to support these type of scenarios. Right now we have RE Plus coming to Hawaii. So if you guys have not seen it, you can look it up, you can Google it. RE Plus, for those of you who don't know, RE Plus stands for Renewable Energy Plus. Prior to their rebranding, they were known as SPI, Solar Power International, Energy Storage International. This is the largest clean energy conference in North America. Once a year in September, they usually have their big conference. This past year in 2023, it was in Las Vegas. They had 1,350 plus exhibitors and over 40,000 attendees. I was on stage 11 times, more than 3-4 times more than anybody else at that conference. Okay. I don't say that to brag. I say that because that's the type of opportunity that we have as a state to take advantage of that relationship. What that has done is now every year they do these regional conferences, and January 22nd and 23rd, they actually are doing their first inaugural event in Hawaii. It's going to be at the Alohilani Hotel in Waikiki on January 22nd and 23rd. It's small because it's a regional event. They're testing it. The goal is make sure it goes successful so that we can really ramp it up in 2025. But this is an opportunity for everyone here to be able to attend. We've been able to create a relationship and a partnership so that, all of the members can get an access pass to attend, and you'll be able to speak specifically with our hydrogen manufacturers, right? So I can say, Mitch, if you can, we actually have GenCell that's coming over. GenCell has a alkaline fuel cell. They primarily operated in the telecom world for a while. They have a 5 kW fuel cell, but recently they've actually repurposed it and they are using it to go into a 372 kWh battery into EV fast charging. So they will be coming, they actually will be exhibiting at RE Plus Hawaii, but we also have the team from Honda. Honda actually is standing up their PEM fuel cells, and they are looking to be able to create stationary fuel cells utilizing the same fuel cells that they have in their Honda Clarity. Now, why is this interesting to me? Because the same guys that fix their cars can now go in and fix the stationary fuel cells that are powering these hotels and hospitals. That's a really interesting opportunity to be able to cross over the workforce training and workforce development. So in addition to some of these manufacturers and technology partners that are coming over, we also have NREL coming over, specifically American Made. Okay, so American Made is the arm from the Department of Energy / NREL, National Renewable Energy Labs. American Made is the entity that disseminates prize monies for competitions and innovation challenges. So this gives us an opportunity to the head of American Made is coming there. Her name is Debbie Broke-Giles. So she will be coming with one of their power connectors, AJ Rossman, as well as one of their platinum regular connectors, Jade Garrett. The Jade has helped over 140 teams win millions of dollars in prizes for innovation challenges and competitions. One of the things that they're looking to do is not only come to Hawaii and see what's going on, but also introduce challenges that are available to our colleges, staff, at these faculty at the colleges, as well as innovation challenges for some of our think tanks here. The other thing is we have the ability to create relationships with American Made and be a part of their community. So imagine now if you were a part of the community that can go and find these innovative teams and actually bring them in and say, hey, let's enter this competition and let me be a mentor to help you win. So I will say these connectors and power connectors, they actually get paid by the Department of Energy to help these teams win. Like, that's stuff that many of us are already doing. Can you imagine if you're actually helping the Department of Energy facilitate the funding of these innovations? So those are some of the other things. On the 24th, we have an add-on event with University of Hawaii at Manoa. We will be doing this, this is right up your alley. We're actually going to be doing a pilot at UH Manoa with the GenCell solution, which is hydrogen to EV charging. We actually have an MOU with UH Manoa, and I believe we could probably put one in on the Big Island as well. So the manufacturers will be there doing a tour of the facility to see, look at locations where we could put it in. But what we're going to be doing at UH Manoa on the 24th is a pitch competition to not only show the kids what could be done, but also to introduce that as a way for them, because they actually have a challenge that is currently running specifically for college students and faculty. So, it's a couple $100,000 that they could win. So these are some of the opportunities that we'll be able to bring on top of that, because of all of the things that's going on, just with the conversations that have been happening because of our introduction to Hawaii with these different opportunities. Many of the Department of Energy, Department of Ag, I mean, I will say this, there's so much money. Being in California, being a part of the speaking circuit, I speak at conferences all over. I'll be at ISNA this week, Intersolar, this week in San Diego. So being a part of all of these different conferences and conventions, there's a lot of interaction with Department of Energy at RE Plus in Las Vegas. Department of Ag, I think I made this announcement last time. Department of Ag has $2 billion they have to give away within the next 15, 16 months. Now, most people think, well, I'm not in agriculture. I'm not a farmer. I don't grow. That's not necessarily it. We have the ability to bring this money to rural areas of our state. So let's look for those companies, those areas, and say, how can we use this money to help electrify these rural? And it's not just putting in EV chargers. It could be changing out your lights in your commercial building to LEDs. All these different things. So it could be low-hanging fruit too, not just full big microgrids and things. So I will pause and I apologize for just kind of blurting everything out, but it's just so exciting, and I want to be able to open it up for questions and have conversations around this rather than a one-way talk story.
Not a problem at all. Very, very interesting what you're describing. I know I came up with a few questions along the way, but does anybody else have any thoughts or questions that they'd like to
AJ, AJ, could you define a nanogrid versus a microgrid for me?
So a nanogrid, what we define as a nanogrid is a smaller, to some degree, residential microgrid. So a nanogrid, let's say on a house, would be part of a community microgrid, which would be connected to the utility macrogrid. Now, a nanogrid doesn't necessarily have to be a house. So one of the things, just 2 days ago, they made an announcement. One of our companies just won an innovation prize from this American made, and one of them was they called it a DIY nanogrid. And it was the ability to, some of us may have these tough sheds in your backyard, right? That you can buy from Home Depot. You're not going to run a power line out there, but I need power sometimes, right? Well, this particular nanogrid that just won the competition, it was the ability to put power utilizing 2 or 3 solar panels, some batteries, plugs for devices, a fan, a small little refrigerator, all within, let's say, a tough shed, right? So again, it's more the size more than anything else, Gary. I hope that answers your question.
So I had a similar question, which was any kind of a either a microgrid or a nanogrid has to have some sort of a power generation or reserve storage capability that can be isolated within that particular area. Is that correct? Okay.
It has to, so one of the things that I've, that I've been taught is a microgrid, nanogrid has to be able to island itself from a grid, right? So many of us have heard about these off-grid scenarios, right? In theory, that's a nanogrid or a microgrid because it's not connected. And the whole idea of this microgrid, nanogrid is the ability for it to operate without being connected to other power sources,
Is
right?
there is there a time? Is there a duration? Is there a duration within which that functionality has to be able to be maintained? Because, for instance, in theory, a microgrid could be storage only, right?
Yep, absolutely. You're right.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, but I think so. This is the other part, okay? So for anybody that's been in the solar world, like selling residential solar, okay, one of the pitch is, guess what? We can eliminate your electricity bill, okay? And that's a real scenario. Maybe in Hawaii potentially, but not up here in California where you got HVAC, okay? Because if you came to my house to sell me solar, you come inside my house and it's a comfortable 74 degrees. Why? Because my electricity bill is manageable. After you put solar on my house, I'm a big Hawaiian. My temperature in my house is now 68 degrees all day, all night. So I called a solar guy and I said, what the heck is going on? You told me that I had zero electricity bill. My electricity bill is more than when I had solar. Really, Mr. Perkins? Before I came, it was 72 degrees and it was kind of uncomfortable. But now that I'm here, it's an icebox. So that's the big thing. Now, the reason why I give that example is because when you put on a microgrid, you size the microgrid for certain things. Critical loads, essential loads, full loads. So to your point, Peter, how long can I stay offline? Well, it depends how much you want to back up, right?
Right.
If you want to back up your entire house with your refrigerator and your 3 freezers in the garage, it's going to be about 60 grand. But if I can only afford this much, well, guess what? I'm going to have to put, a service panel specifically to be able to manage just your refrigerator, your garage door opener, and a few plugs and lights.
Yeah, there's definitely a debate going on, around the world about how much storage is necessary as backup power, and it ranges from 4 hours to 8 hours to 16. There are some that are going, you need to have 2 weeks. I've even seen 28 days for Northern Europe. So
and again, it all boils down to how much you can afford.
Yes,
that's the biggest thing. I don't care what anybody says. You can tell me your requirements and I can build it. Can you afford it?
Right.
That's the big conversation.
Hey,
right?
Keone, I know you had your hand up. You're muted.
Calamai. AJ, great presentation. I'm over here nodding my head. I'm having a great time on this call, man. Thanks so much, Mahalo.
You're welcome.
My question, you kind of hit it on the head right there with your last statement about when we have the opportunity to what we feel what's been presented as energy abundance. It is not necessarily the case. And I'm a Waianae resident. And, I'm going to use the word energy injustice. Okay. We get rural areas, Makaha, Nanakuli, Lulole, massive rural area, a lot of old Hicks homes over here. So infrastructure, what can you afford? Right? You mentioned that we can build it, but what can you afford? So when you get into a lot of these communities, Kapuna housing, they cannot afford to be able to go into these places. So we have this energy injustice. But what I really like about the microgrid, nanogrid scenarios, and I had a different term for it, it's business as usual, right? Do we have enough energy to go ahead and work in the shop, to pull out the welder, to go and do the trades, to be doing the things that we normally do, that when the lights and the power does go out, if we have the right system in place, right? If we have island off, as you said, right? Now we have a system. We're building to the future, and our residential communities can island off. Are we designing business as usual scenarios? And that's kind of where I wanted to lead in, because I think that we are deserving as demonstrating that in our vulnerable communities, this business as usual scenario. So when the lights go out, that we have energy abundance, but then that we're not, okay, don't touch that, don't run that. If we have true energy independence, we should be able to run business as usual. And so mahalo nui. That was an awesome call. I loved it.
So Keone, I'd like to tag on to what you're saying, okay? So if you guys don't mind, I'm gonna take a kind of like a veering to, right, because I've been going back and forth to Hawaii for a little while, talking about energy stuff, and it's interesting because so many people are like, oh man, it's so nice to have somebody understand energy in this way, so much stuff, and it's such a trip to think that it's a local boy, okay? But this is because I'm not, I'll say it's, I'm not an engineer, I'm not a PhD, I'm not a scientist. I'm a businessman. So I think with the business lens on, okay? So this is one of the things that I hear. This is what has helped propel me in this industry. It was this conversation. My company before Instant On was called DR Microgrids. We designed microgrids to respond to demand response. Demand response is how you get paid from the utility. Okay, so this is actually where this whole idea for DR microgrids came in. 7 years ago, we did a project in New Zealand, and we had to do it in New Zealand because we couldn't do it in the US. What we did was we did a pilot, 20,000 homes. We put solar, a 10 kWh battery, and controls on all of those homes in a PPA, 25-year PPA, okay? Solar power purchase agreement, okay? So what we did was we actually utilized our controls to segment 20% of the batteries to sell back to the utility. So if you come home from your house, you got a 10 kWh battery, it shows full, but it's actually only 8 kW because I got 2 kW, and I'm selling it back to the utility, okay? This one was unique because we gave Mercury, the utility, the staple easy red button. Just press the button. Anytime you need the power, you just press the button, okay? The year prior to this installation, they called the demand response 7 times. When we gave them this capability, they called it 206 times. Now, here is where the business mind comes in. A typical PPA, the payback period is between 7 and 12 years. Okay, that's what the conversation was at the time. But we have a new revenue getting paid from the utility for supporting it with demand response. Our new payback period, 18 months. So Keone, to your point, imagine if we went ahead and put a microgrid on all the Ohana land out there in Waianae and Makaha. And we created that same capabilities because I've got a 25-year PPA that is cash positive for 22 years. If you want, I can take you another step forward and show you the crazy thinking that we do. And I say crazy because nobody else is thinking about this. So because of that learning in New Zealand, guess what? I don't know about if you guys know this, but people that install batteries, right? Let's say it costs $15,000 to install a Tesla Powerwall. Okay? To install a second Tesla Powerwall, reality is it's just the cost of the battery. Okay, because I already got the installer on, I already got everything. Like my biggest cost is installing one. So if I install 2, instead of me paying 15 grand, let's say it's 20 grand. Okay. So what we would do is when I was installing nanogrids, you know what size batteries I put in my nanogrids? Minimum 40 kW. the equivalent of 3 or 4 Tesla Powerwalls. Why? Because that's free real estate for me. As a aggregator selling power back to the utility, I now use your real estate, your closet, to put 40 kW of battery. You never going to use that. Never. When an emergency comes up, that's when I go ahead and give you all 40 kW. But when it's not emergency, I'm taking 35 kW and selling it to the grid every single day. I am monetizing that battery like crazy. Can you imagine if we did that? That's the thinking that we need to think around, right? Now here's another one, and that's how we used to build nanogrids with minimum 40 kW batteries in it, right? Because our cost to install was much lower. Now we've actually changed our entire business model when it comes to residential. Now, mind you, we don't do residential. We don't knock on doors and do one at a time. We do 2,000 homes at once, okay? So we don't ever do one batch. So we don't compete against solar installers. We come in and say, sister, we're going to do the entire community at one time. Why? Because economies of scale, right? But now when we build nanogrids, we don't put batteries in the house. Okay? What we are working on with the finance company is solar and V2G in the house, and bring a V2G capable vehicle, electric vehicle, into that environment. Why? Because the smallest electric vehicle battery is still multiplier bigger than a 10 kWh battery sitting on the wall. So do you want to spend $15,000 on a power wall that's sitting on your wall? Or take that $15,000 and use it as a down payment to a Nissan Leaf that you can drive around all the time, and in cases of emergency, your car should be at home, and then you plug it into the V2G capabilities that your nanogrid has. You now have 60, 80 kW available, way bigger. So to Peter's point, instead of me creating this environment where I only have 4 to 6 hours of backup power because I have a 10 kW or 13 kWh battery on my wall, I now got an entire battery of reserve in a Nissan Leaf. So again, that's the forward thinking we have to think about. So Keone, to your point, how do we take care of these people? This is the biggest thing right here. This is what I was telling all of these people, okay? We should be putting electric vehicles on every single kupuna's house and selling it back into the grid. Why? Because kupuna don't do the things that we do. I can tell you, my parents, they drive their car maybe about 4 hours a week. We could literally be dropping that power back in. Please go ahead, Alika.
Hello, AJ. Wow, I am just blown away by everything you're saying and a lot of things that we were trying to do over here too. And we recently got the results from the PUC and HECO about their bring your own device scenario where they want to grab things from people's houses now instead of building these big power stations and everything like that. I'm like, oh my gosh, you're talking their language, and this is something that would be perfect for the Big Island because that's what they need up there. And we want to do some projects on the Big Island. I'm working with Keone Ford, so I'm looking forward to meeting you on the 22nd. I think there's a lot of good conversations that we could have, and man, it's just mind blowing, and it's just so on track. And thank you. I just want to say thank you.
You're welcome. No, I appreciate it, and I'm glad to hear this because to that BYOD conversation, okay? Honda is coming to Hawaii, right? You've got the head of their hydrogen division and the head of their smart home division. Why are they coming to Hawaii? Why? Because I told them about the BYOD program. Now, why is that important to them? Well, because I don't know if you guys know this, but they're coming out with a hybrid in a year or two. Their Honda CR-V is going to be a hybrid battery and hydrogen. So if I were to go ahead and take a Nissan Leaf and plug in V2G on this scenario that we talked about, right? At some point, if the sun is not powering my house and my car, at some point that battery could potentially run out. right? Can you imagine if you actually had a Honda hybrid powered by hydrogen? If you had a hydrogen fueling station, you could literally drive to the fueling station, put hydrogen inside, drive it back home, and because it is clean energy, you can turn it on, and now it'll start to power your house again. That's why Honda is sitting there saying, AJ, this is serious? Like, yeah. So I love the idea of smart thermostats, hot water heaters. I love all that stuff. But can you imagine if I got 80 kW dropping in? If you're only doing 1 or 2 kW of reduction, oh man, the reality is you're talking $5 a month to grandma. But if you drop it in 40, 60 kW every single day, I can tell you when we try it on the open market up here, it becomes significant. 18 months payback period versus 7 to 10 years. So I'm excited, Alika, about being able to introduce you to some of these people.
AJ,
Wow.
excuse me. So question, one thing I'm not clear on is you're describing these storage systems that are going to be within a large number of residences, and you're going to take 20% and sell it back to the utility whenever they need to load balance or whenever there's issues happening.
Yep.
So does the homeowner pay for the infrastructure? Is it a joint venture between you and the homeowner? How does that work, and who pays for the power that gets sold back?
That's a great question, Peter. So
sorry.
So this is one of the things that I have seen. Okay. And I'll credit this conversation to Jigger Shaw, because Jigger's a genius when it comes to money, energy, being able to take and calculate these risks. Okay. And I remember I was having a conversation with him. I think we were speaking on a panel once, and he actually said, he's like, AJ, one of the things that makes me so sad, and this is one of the biggest problems I'm trying to solve. He's like, I wish that everyday people could invest in my company. And I'm like, help me understand this. He's like, AJ, in order for it to be an investor and generate capital, you have to be an accredited investor, like most investments. Okay? The problem is all of our investments have very low risk. And I think all of us that play in the utility scale have been able to see some of the returns that are able to be generated when you have the right tools in place, when you have the right systems in place. So to the point where someone like Jigger and Generate Capital have really understood the mechanics of creating a successful piece of paper, he's like, AJ, we got double-digit returns on all of our stuff. I wish there was a way for me to let regular, non-accredited people invest their money into these infrastructure. Now, this was back in 2018-ish, okay? Now, future forward, let's think about this, okay? So to your point, Peter, AJ, would you pay for that family to get it? Or would that family pay for it? I mean, that's the spectrum, right? On one side, a company paid for it. On the other side, the people pay for it. Well, it's like buying solar and doing a solar PPA. Your return is better if you buy it. I think we can all agree on that, right? If you do a PPA, you get a little bit of savings, but if you buy it, that's where you get all the benefits, okay? So on the same side, if I were to go ahead and do this nano grid payback, blah, 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 I'm going to give you a smaller return than if you bought it yourself. The problem is auntie and uncle may not be able to afford that upfront cost, right? So what I'm hoping to do, this is my dream, instead of me going out and getting $100 million to do this huge island-wide project, how about if I get 20 million, do the project, show the returns, and then now take the other 20 million and start infusing 10% of local money. Continue to prove it, do the next 20 million and infuse 25% local money. Then by the time I get to the end, I've got 60, 70% of community dollars, and I've created the template that allows Uncle Joel, who live in Waianae, to be able to say, you know what? I support this whole microgrid in our community, and I'm gonna put $500 in. Well, guess what, Uncle Joe? Your $500 gonna return you a 10% return on you investing in your community rising. All boats rise with the tide. So back to your points, Peter. I know that if we do this right, the ROI is there, which means a lot of people are willing to invest. That doesn't always make me happy because our local people should also be the one to be beneficiaries of that return that people like us have figured out, right? If I've reduced the risk, by saying, state of Hawaii, you're going to go ahead and pay this fuel, you're going to give this fuel cell, integration, a 30-year contract. Oh my gosh. You know what they're going to do with that? They're going to operate it for 7 to 10 years, and then they're going to sell it to a teachers union. They're going to make their money and then some, and then go ahead and sell it off and make that money. And the teachers union earns a 9 to 12% return. How come we cannot? How come Waianae community cannot? So again, this is complex, but this is stuff that I'm watching very intently.
It sounds almost, I mean, and again, I'm just sort of, digesting this idea because I mean, it's totally brand new to me, but I mean, it sounds like it's a way to do a micro co-op.
Absolutely. That's exactly it.
Without having to,
we've got the mechanisms in
deal
place.
with the massive without the regulatory.
Absolutely. Henry?
I hope the HHL can get their head around that.
It's not easy. I mean, I can tell you that. Like the stuff that we're talking to you guys about, even up here, they're still trying to figure this out, right? I mean, the stuff that I'm telling you guys, I'm going deep. I'm telling you guys stuff that I don't tell a lot of people because it's like, what? But I mean, I'm trying to help you guys see. AJ's not sitting here because Jerry said, AJ, I like you, come over there. I'm showing you guys the ingenuity that can happen is real. You don't have to take my word for it. You go ahead and do the research yourself. Go ahead and see what it is. And you can validate whether or not this holds water. Henry?
Aloha, AJ.
Aloha.
So your model on Waianae, would the utility still own the lines and each individual house would feed into that?
So that's a great question. To me, one of the things that I hear a lot is utilities in the future will change. I hear that one of the best things that utilities should be doing is T&D, transmission and distribution. I hear that from so many people. So can you imagine if we had DERs, distributed energy resources, on every house, on every community, and the utility is responsible for transmission and distribution. Their sole responsibility is making sure that the T&D lines and generation centers, distribution centers are at the highest level of safety and efficiency. So instead of them having to spend money on all these places, that's where they are. Does that make sense, Henry?
Yes, in 1996, we were in a docket at the PUC in which we advocated a stock split with T&D going one way and generation going the other way for the utility.
It's there. People are talking about all around the country for so many reasons, and the wildfires are just one of those conversations, right? So I think that, but the problem is, how do you make that conversation happen when Uncle Joe in Waianae is not going to have power, right? So you got to be able to baby step this to be able to say, okay, I've got this entity that's willing to go ahead and do an entire nanogrid scenario on every house in a community microgrid. Utility, could you guys just be T&D for this community, right? And I mean, don't just sit there and say, you got to do this for the whole island. We're going to get screwed. Don't be stupid. But let's take it one community at a time. We're building these brand new communities. Why don't you start that community? Start that community, do all off-grid scenarios with T&D supported by the utility. This way their costs are lower. Show them that this could be a benefit to them.
The one thing to keep in mind is there is a microgrid docket open at the Public Utilities Commission right now, and they are looking at that model where utility lines are part of the islanded grid.
Awesome. That's awesome. See, this is the thing. People, like when I first started getting involved with microgrids, people used to ask me, AJ, the utilities must hate you. Come on, bro. I'm Hawaiian. Everybody loves the Hawaiians, but this is the biggest thing. I don't go into the utilities and say, I'm gonna take your customer. Let me show you how beautiful this could work. Hey, PG&E, you're gonna have to shut off the power in this region during a wildfire. You tell me your 5 biggest customers that you are afraid to shut off their power. I will go to them and give them a microgrid at my cost. So guess what? When you shut off the grid, they're not gonna come and sue you. I went from being their enemy to their friend. So that's how we need to approach this. This isn't a either or, it should be an and or, right? Diana?
Hi, aloha.
Aloha.
Thanks for this very exciting conversation. I really love the complexity of the topic. I have two questions leading back to different parts of the system that you described. My first question is, are you working with multiple sources of energy generation? Like, can you implement integrating solar with wind and different things? Because I know that's usually a complexity that's challenging for these systems. And the other question is, are you also experimenting with alternative or innovative solutions for the energy storage, like with phase changing materials or other types
Old
of
batteries and
for
all
bigger
that stuff.
scales of, yeah, for bigger scale of projects, that's
Always.
a different game. So I was just curious about what is going on there.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So let me help you guys understand my thought about bringing technology to Hawaii. I don't want to bring anything to Hawaii until it's been tested someplace else. Because if it explodes or if something goes wrong, more than likely it's stuck on the islands. That scares me. The work that I do with the policy and utilities and all that stuff, I'm considered a subject matter expert on microgrids to various utilities. And they call on me to help them with pilots a lot. Okay? Why? Because I can get the customers that will agree to these pilots. Okay? Now, they don't always go the way we expect and hope. Okay? One of the biggest criteria that they ask me when I go and find these pilot locations, these hosts, okay? One of the biggest criteria that they look for is a friend. What does that mean? AJ, if something goes wrong with this, they're not going to call the press and say this bad stuff happened. That's a real statement. Okay? So if that's the statement for the utilities, do I want to bring it to Hawaii? So specifically, battery technology. I love batteries. I use a ton of batteries over here. It scares me to send it to Hawaii. Why? Because when the batteries are no longer useful, what are we going to do with them? It's going to sit there. Nobody wants to take our junk.
They end up in Waimanalo Gulch in Waianae.
That's for sure. But one of the groups that I'm bringing to RE Plus is a Second Life battery manufacturer. What they do is take first life batteries from electric vehicles. Once they go down to the point where it's not good in electric vehicles, now they take it and create stationary storage. Why is that important for us? Because it's cheaper than brand new utility scale or commercial and industrial storage. So it's a lower cost, same warranty, but this is the other part. Now we got first life in the electric vehicle, second life in stationary storage. And then when it's done in the stationary storage side, we take it and we mine all of the materials, the precious metals and materials, send it back to our first life manufacturer, who just so happens is opening up a US manufacturing plant in Buckeye, Arizona, in the US. So we've created as much as we possibly can, a circular environment. Now, what is the challenge in that? And this is where I'm working with the Second Life battery manufacturer, is I need chain of custody. That is the most important part in the success of this, because if I were to go ahead and take the batteries from my Tesla and then send it over to the Second Life battery, and then they put it up in this, this warehouse, when it's done there, what is the warehouse going to do? Throw it away. Whoa, you don't touch that. That's no longer your battery. That's mine. I have chain of custody. So I'm going to take it out, replace it, but I'm going to take it out and move it back to first life opportunities. The chain of custody is super important in this. So again, this is another concept that I've talked to. So I sit as an island ambassador for Island Innovations, and I talk to island representatives all around the world. In California and many other places, we see people trying to create EVs with 1,000-mile range and 500-mile range, and everybody's like, AJ, what do you think about that? I'm from Hawaii. I think it's stupid. It's stupid. Absolutely dumb. Because 500 miles can drive you straight into the ocean. So what we should do is, when we take these second life electric vehicles in California, you know what we should do? This is my proposal to them. We should send them to islands. Because a 350-mile range at $80,000 or $90,000 in California may be good. But once you're done with it, it still has a 100-mile range. Can you imagine these used electric vehicles on an island? Like literally driving around the street. It's so simple. You know, hydrogen vehicles. Why do I need a 1,000-mile range on a hydrogen vehicle? I get one fueling station. That's all I need on Oahu. Because I can drive. Now, it's not convenient, but it's very possible, right? So these are the different things. We got to think differently about how we bring stuff to our islands. That's a big scenario for me. I hope that answers your question, Diana.
Personally.
Oh, and then on the other part, as far as the various generations and storages, right? So I mean, I can say we use solar, wind, and I'll be upfront. We only use as much solar as it'll give us tax credits. Because solar does not give us the amount of land, the amount of power that we need for the power density, right? Sometimes we don't have as much room, even though it's California and we got a lot of room compared to Hawaii. I don't have the ability. 1 megawatt of solar is 5.5 acres. I literally have one container for a micro turbine, 40 feet, and I got 1 megawatt. Right? So these are so I work with micro turbines, fuel cells, hydrogen fuel cells, natural gas fuel cells, solar, wind, all of these different generations. On the battery side, we do lithium ion phosphate, flow batteries. So for me, I'm agnostic. That's the beautiful part about me not being a scientist, is I'm not geeking out only on hydrogen. I'm sitting there saying, I need a solution for the customer. What does this look like? Well, flow is long duration. Okay, well, what about if it poisons the ground, right? I mean, I'm asking all of these different questions. So the other part that you were talking about is, how does that all work? The number one challenge in microgrids is interoperability. That is the word, interoperability, right? Why? Because, and this has happened so many times, okay? Solar guy comes in, installs solar, gets it permitted, it's working. Battery comes in, gets it working, everything's good, gets it permitted, all good. The moment you put controls and you bring it all together for a microgrid, not working. You know what? My solar was installed and it was permitted. It must be his fault. You know, mine's like literally, it's pointing feet back and forth. Interoperability is one of the number one challenges. I was brought in 5 years ago when we were going through COVID scenarios, and there was this installer in California. They had installed 1,000 solar plus storage installations here in California. They called me up, AJ, I need your help. Can you help us with this? We have a 50% failure rate. I'm like, what? I mean, what kind of solar are you guys using? Canadian Solar. What kind of battery are you guys using? 2 different good battery manufacturers. You're talking top tier manufacturers of the components. 50% failure rate. They had 150 people in the call center taking calls. 87 trucks that were rolling every day because of the failure rate. Why? Interoperability. So Diana, your point as far as that's the challenge, I can't even tell you how important what you're talking about is. Interoperability. You need a company that understands microgrids, not just solar, not just battery, because bringing them all together, that's an art in and of itself. Next question.
AJ.
You
Yes,
know,
sir.
we're kind
Noel.
of going over time, but
Yeah,
I wanted to
I
ask that Peter was asking me, and that is, okay, so we like AJ, we like what he's saying. So what kind of support does he need? What's the plan? Are we gonna lobby someone somewhere? What are we gonna do?
So I appreciate that. I somebody that I've been talking to in Hawaii heard that I had a meeting with that Jerry set up a meeting with Mayor Roth. And they're like, AJ, if you want to talk to the mayor, I can call him up and blah blah blah. And I said, let me just say this. I'm not trying to talk to anybody. I will go wherever the people ask me. I can only do what the people ask me because I was born and raised there. If you come like a bull in a Chinese shop, somebody gonna run you back over. So I have to be very cognizant of how I step into this, right? Now, the request as far as what can we do to help, I think we can all agree there are some opportunities that are right in front of us to start creating traction. I can say on our side specifically, TechFlow has the pedigree, the capabilities, and the talent and resources to do all the work that we need in Hawaii. TechFlow also has the knowledge and understanding that we need to utilize as many resources in Hawaii to help do the actual integration. Now, why is that important? Because in order to win some of these RFPs and things like that, you need the pedigree, you need past performance, you need things that show you know what you're doing. So I'm saying that we have that in one sense. If we have other integrators in Hawaii that can do that, we'd be happy to run in as sub. So whether we use my company as prime or sub, it doesn't matter. How do we help bring our talents and capabilities to these solutions that we're trying to come up with? EV infrastructure, I can tell you there's nobody else in the country that has that more locked down than us. Microgrids and all of that, that's something that we know inside and out. Literally, every pole and wire on Camp Pendleton was put on by my boss, right? The first vehicle to microgrid installation in the world was done by us 19 years ago before EVs was an actual term. So these are the capabilities that we have at our disposal. Now, how do we move this forward? One of the opportunities that we have is at RE Plus, we have a stage in which to be able to make announcements. So if we have people, companies, policies that we would like to create announcements for, we can actually use that as a stage to say, hey, you know what? Mayor Roth is saying we know Senator Okai wants to introduce a bill towards firm renewables. Okay, well, perfect. Well, the mayor of Big Island is saying not only do we want firm renewables, but we want hydrogen as backup power because we made the deal a long time ago. All backup power in hospitals and hotels need to be clean energy. We're not even close. We're like very 0.1%. So how do we help them get the tools they need to set policies and set these things moving forward? And then, like I said, I'm creating the runway for us to get access to funding from the federal government, from various resources, and create this. So, what is it that you guys can do to help me understand where those opportunities really lie that we can go after? I hope that helps, but I just, I'm trying to be cognizant of not trying to be the bull in the china shop.
No, absolutely. It helps. And I think that, this is for me, I can speak for me as an individual that this has really helped me to understand what, where the vision and what you're pursuing is. And unless I'm mistaken, what you're describing is all downstream implementation. And when I say downstream, it's post generation, and it's also post regulatory in a sense, because
interesting
what we have in Henry?
It's not post-regulatory because what AJ is suggesting is using utility lines within neighborhoods. And a power purchase agreement has to be approved by the commission.
Makes sense.
I think, Henry, I think this is another one of those times where I'm using the wrong words. When I say post-regulatory, it's in need of regulatory modernization. That regulatory modernization can facilitate the downstream. And, you know, and what that does is it will facilitate the upstream, because if you're looking at hydrogen, or if you're looking at anything, well, let's just take hydrogen. What you're talking about is needing massive amounts of electricity to produce electrolytic hydrogen, and that's all additive power. That's all power.
That's if you're talking about electrolysis, Peter, right? And that's, I mean, this is one thing that I will say. Like, in all of our hydrogen production conversations here, I've never talked about electrolysis.
Okay.
And California, of any state, has the best opportunity for electrolysis because we literally pay Arizona to take our excess energy. Hawaii, we don't have that excess energy. So one thing that I can say that all the smart people have told me is it's stupid to make power, to make hydrogen, to make power again, right? And I
agree.
You know, it's very simple, right?
I agree.
So to me, it's not a matter of saying, let's go make a lot of power so that we can use electrolysis. Like, that's not the technology we should be using right now. Hydrogen is the conversation, but not you know, again, I'm just trying to help make sure that we're understanding that it's not about trying to build more solar to make hydrogen.
Within the context that you're discussing, and this is something that, you know, that I think, you know, because of, you know, how long we've gone, I would love to have a discussion, because my focus on my focus on hydrogen is that it's a building block for liquid fuels.
Absolutely.
Transportation. And I totally agree with you that hydrogen as a source of energy for the grid makes no sense at all. So, anyhow, I think this is a conversation that would be worth having. I don't know what, you know, I'll follow up with an email and we'll see what the options are.
I'll be meeting with Jennifer Potter. Jennifer actually asked me to help them in Maui. I'll actually be speaking with her at Intersolar next week on the 17th. And then I will be introducing her to all of our team on Oahu, because she will also be at RE+. So we have both Jenny Potter as well as Lorena Kiba that's going to be there. And you know, you've got two powerhouses right there that we can use, right?
Yeah, whatever makes sense on your end. I mean, we're available, and I think there are avenues where we can facilitate goals.
And you know, on the hydrogen side, you know, Mitch, I know you're an expert in that, and I would be happy to send you information from our hydrogen production manufacturer, and even talk towards that, you know, in a different conversation. For anybody that wants to know, like, I'm not saying I want to bring my hydrogen there, because from what I'm hearing, we have people in Hawaii doing hydrogen, and I'm not trying to change everything, but I am saying that the hydrogen pilot that we're doing in California City, we're able to produce hydrogen at $6 per kilogram pre-incentives. That's happening right now in Canada. And we're saying, show us this in California, right? So at minimum, if all I sit there and do is say, hey, we're going to just bring this technology, that's not my goal. My goal is to say, how do we utilize this, right? But I will say that I'm not going to say, let's do electrolysis and build 50 megawatts of, you know, solar power to support hydrogen. It's just, that's just not what I'm going to do. So Mitch, I'd be happy to send that to you and whoever else would like to see and learn more about the technology we're piloting.
AJ, before we run, and while we're on the topic of hydrogen, I do have a request, because I feel that in being able to bridge the conversation, we have to normalize it. And to me, Hawaii lifestyle is built upon this, and I'm sure you agree, is propane. Don't touch my propane.
100%.
And propane is no different than hydrogen. Really, if you really take a look at it. And so if we have the capacity to demonstrate not at some laboratory at UH, but to be able to bring maybe some of your resources or manufacturers to bring a couple of bottles that we could hook up to some barbecue grills and start to do some Calbee ribs on some hydrogen, burning hydrogen. And we go down to the beach parks and we just start having general dialogue with communities, going to Waimanalo, go to Whitmore Village, go to Kaneohe, and go to Hilo. Go to Kauai,
you know,
Kona.
Tony, for just so you know, like the reason why our contract at California City is energy and telecom is because I learned that if I open up the ground to lay my energy lines and I run my telecom lines at the same time, I reduce the cost of telecom by 50 to 80%. So I can almost give telecom away to the city just by inviting the telecom lines at the same time. What I've also done right now with our project in Cal City, we actually have a partner that lays hydrogen lines and simultaneously allows us to run our energy and telecom lines. Can you imagine? Right. So to your point, creating the infrastructure. So that's what we're looking to do in California City because they do not have a lot of natural gas lines, which is unusual. So I'm literally working with the utility, SoCal Gas, saying, don't try to figure out how to put natural gas lines. Let's just start with the Tesla. Don't convert. Let's just go straight. So, you know, that's what we're using is that concept. And again, I'm not bringing it to Hawaii yet because I got to test it out. You know what I mean? I don't want to your point, go ahead and say, here's a bottle. Let's see how this works. You know, like in my mind, let's use the bottle in California. If it explodes, I got the Mojave deficit to cover us up, right?
Right.
So,
and that's why I make mention, and I talked to Peter about this, that, you know, for me, I can buy a hydrogen powered grill from Australia, a Heatley grill, burn hydrogen today.
yeah.
It'll be here in 2 weeks. The problem is that I don't have a bottle
Correct.
that I can demonstrate. And I think that's just a really great way to enroll people, to get people excited.
And that's literally what we're doing. But you know, again, economies of scale. For me to go ahead and say, here's a bottle at $48 a kilogram versus, you know, I've created this entire infrastructure that's costing me $6 per kilogram, and now I can rebottle it. You know what I mean? So it's trying to balance that. So I 100% hear what you're saying, Tony. I totally agree.
It's not about really selling. It's about being able to have a couple to be able to begin bridging it, right? I know Toyota has a bottle that they're using for the home that they've been designing, but I'm sure when you mention Honda, I brought it up because you talk about Honda and what they're doing and their hybrid, and so
I have one of my manufacturers that's coming to RE Plus. He actually, you can look it up. It's P2E, and I'll send it to you guys as well. They actually have a 1.5 kW fuel cell for the home. Their fuel cell can run off of hydrogen. But if you alter some of the things inside of that fuel cell, you can have a second fuel cell box that can actually be an electrolyzer. So the solar on my house can now produce hydrogen in the house. So it's just crazy, you know. But again, like I said, I don't want to just bring it to Hawaii and just start testing stuff, right? I mean, Mitch knows you don't just bring craziness like that. You got to see how can it work, how can it work in scale, and then we bring it to our people. Because at the end of the day, something explodes. It's my family's name, not, you know, my company's, right? So don't worry, we'll definitely be bringing this stuff. Mitch, you know, again, thank you so much for, you know, bearing with the conversation that I'm having.
So mahalo for you know, joining us and sharing your mana'o with the team, and I do look forward to meeting in person at RE and you know, extending the conversation. There's quite a bit that we covered today, a lot of possibilities that we can talk through, and I do look forward to connecting outside of this venue.
Wow.